The owner of the dealership waited nearly 20 minutes before anyone bothered to ask if she needed help. Monica Hayes stepped through the glass doors of the dealership just after noon on a bright Thursday, carrying nothing more than a small handbag and a notebook. The showroom floor stretched before her beneath rows of polished lights reflecting off dozens of vehicles arranged in perfect lines. New SUVs gleamed beneath promotional banners. Sales representatives moved confidently between customers, smiling, shaking hands, and discussing financing options. From a distance, everything looked successful. Everything looked professional. Monica paused near the entrance and quietly observed the room. She wore simple dark jeans, comfortable shoes, and a light gray jacket. There was nothing about her appearance that suggested she was the founder and chief executive officer of one of the fastest-growing dealership groups in the region. That was intentional. For months, complaints had arrived from this location. Some were small, some were serious. Yet every report sent to headquarters painted a different picture. According to management, the dealership was thriving. Customer satisfaction scores looked acceptable. Employee evaluations looked positive. On paper, everything seemed fine. Monica preferred reality over paperwork. A salesman walked past her carrying a folder and never acknowledged her presence. Another employee crossed the showroom while laughing with a customer and did the same. Monica glanced at her watch. 3 minutes had passed. Then 5. Then 7. She remained near the front entrance, standing beside a display vehicle advertised as the dealership's best-selling family SUV. Nobody approached. Nobody greeted her. Nobody asked whether she needed assistance. Across the showroom, a white couple entered through another set of doors. Almost immediately, 2 salespeople smiled and walked toward them. Hands were shaken. Introductions were exchanged. Complimentary coffee was offered. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Monica quietly recorded the time in her notebook. She did not look angry. She looked curious. That was often more powerful. 10 minutes later, she slowly walked deeper into the showroom. A large dealership logo covered one wall above the customer lounge. Seeing it stirred something inside her. Years earlier, she had sketched the first version of that logo herself during a late night at a folding table in a tiny office. Back then, the company consisted of a handful of employees and a simple promise. Every customer would be treated with respect. No exceptions. Looking around now, Monica wondered whether anyone inside this building still remembered that promise. A salesman finally glanced in her direction. Relief flickered briefly across Monica's face. Then he turned away and continued speaking with another customer. Nearby, 2 employees stood discussing monthly sales numbers. Neither acknowledged her. 15 minutes had now passed since she entered the dealership. Around her, customers came and went. Some were greeted warmly. Others received immediate assistance. Monica remained invisible. The longer it continued, the clearer the problem became. This was not a busy afternoon. Staff members were available. The issue was not workload. The issue was choice. Someone had decided she was not worth their time. Monica calmly walked toward the customer lounge and sat beneath the large company logo. Sunlight streamed through the showroom windows and reflected across the polished floor. She opened her notebook again and wrote a single sentence. Then she closed it. Across the room, a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out of a glass office overlooking the showroom. Employees immediately straightened their posture when they saw him. Conversations changed. Attitudes shifted. The man surveyed the floor like someone accustomed to being in charge. His name was Brad Collins, General Sales Manager. Within seconds, his eyes landed on Monica. He studied her briefly. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. It was the kind of smile that came from making an assumption before asking a question. And that assumption was about to become a very expensive mistake. Brad Collins descended the short staircase from the glass office overlooking the showroom with the easy confidence of a man who believed he understood every customer within seconds of seeing them. Several sales representatives immediately adjusted their posture as he crossed the polished floor. Monica Hayes watched the reaction carefully. Respect earned through leadership looked different from obedience created through fear. What she saw in the showroom suggested the second. Brad approached the customer lounge and stopped a few feet away. His eyes moved briefly from Monica's simple clothing to the notebook resting on the table beside her. The faint smile remained. "Can I help you with something?" he asked. The question sounded polite on the surface, but Monica noticed the lack of genuine interest behind it. She returned a calm smile. I hope so. I have been here for a little while and wanted to learn more about one of your SUVs. Brad glanced toward the showroom floor. Which one? Monica pointed toward a dark blue family SUV positioned near the center display. That one. Brad looked at the vehicle and then back at Monica. That model starts at a higher price point. Monica nodded. I saw that. Brad remained standing rather than offering to walk her over to the vehicle. Many customers prefer to review financing options before spending time looking at inventory. Monica noticed the wording immediately. Not all customers. Many customers. The assumption underneath the sentence was difficult to miss. I would still like to learn more about it, she replied. Brad folded his arms. What exactly are you looking for? Monica could have answered with detailed questions about engine performance, safety technology, towing capacity, and customer satisfaction ratings. Instead, she asked something simpler. What makes that vehicle popular with families? Brad hesitated. He clearly had not expected the conversation to continue. Across the showroom, another customer entered through the front doors. Within seconds, a salesperson approached him with a welcoming smile and a handshake. Monica watched the interaction from the corner of her eye. Brad noticed it too, but offered no explanation. Instead, he gestured vaguely toward the SUV. You can find most of the information online. Monica looked at him quietly. The answer said far more than he realized. For several moments, neither spoke. Around them, sales representatives moved between customers. Some laughed. Some discussed trade-in values. Some finalized paperwork. Yet nobody approached Monica. It was as though Brad's attitude had silently communicated that she was not worth the effort. Monica opened her notebook and wrote another brief observation. Brad frowned. Are you taking notes? She smiled politely. I like to remember details. The answer seemed to make him uncomfortable. He glanced toward the showroom floor and then back toward his office above. For the first time, Monica noticed something important. Employees constantly watched Brad before making decisions. They mirrored his behavior. They copied his tone. They followed his lead. The problem was larger than one manager. The culture of the entire dealership appeared shaped by him. Monica closed the notebook and looked once more at the large company logo displayed across the far wall. Sunlight reflected across the polished surface. Years ago, that logo represented opportunity, trust, and service. Sitting beneath it now, she found herself wondering how many customers had experienced exactly what she was experiencing today. And as Brad prepared to walk away without helping her, Monica realized this undercover visit was already revealing more than months of reports ever had. Brad Collins walked away without offering a brochure, a test drive, or even the most basic customer assistance. Monica Hayes watched him cross the showroom floor and disappear into a conversation with another salesperson near a row of luxury pickup trucks. The interaction lasted less than 5 minutes, yet it revealed something important. Brad had not simply failed to help her. He had made a decision about her value before learning anything about her. Monica remained seated in the customer lounge beneath the dealership logo and continued observing. The longer she watched, the more obvious the patterns became. A young salesman hurried across the showroom carrying bottled water for a customer wearing an expensive watch and tailored suit. Another employee spent nearly 20 minutes discussing financing options with a couple who had arrived in a luxury vehicle. Meanwhile, a middle-aged woman standing alone near a compact SUV struggled to get anyone's attention. Monica noticed her looking around repeatedly before eventually walking toward the reception desk herself. No employee volunteered to help. No one approached. The woman eventually left. Monica quietly made another note. 15 minutes later, an elderly man entered carrying a folder of paperwork. He moved slowly and appeared uncertain about where to go. Instead of greeting him, 2 salespeople continued discussing commissions near the front entrance. The man eventually found a chair and waited by himself. Monica watched his expression. It was not anger. It was disappointment. She had seen that look before. Customers rarely remembered every detail of a business transaction. They remembered how people made them feel. Across the showroom floor, Brad continued directing operations. Employees constantly looked toward him before making decisions. When he laughed, others laughed. When he ignored someone, others seemed to do the same. The culture of the dealership flowed from him like water moving downhill. Monica had spent years building companies and understood a simple truth. Most organizational problems were not created by policies. They were created by examples. Suddenly, a young sales associate approached the customer lounge. Monica glanced up, thinking someone had finally decided to help. Instead, the employee walked directly past her and greeted a customer who had just entered through the side door. Within seconds, the customer was being escorted toward a vehicle display. Monica smiled faintly. The pattern was becoming impossible to deny. She looked toward the large glass office overlooking the showroom. Brad stood inside speaking with another manager while reviewing performance charts displayed on a screen. Numbers, rankings, sales targets. Everything appeared focused on transactions. Very little appeared focused on people. Monica remembered the early years of the company. Back when she personally greeted customers on showroom floors. Back when managers were taught that every visitor deserved attention whether they planned to purchase a vehicle that day or not. Respect had always been the first step. Sales came later. Looking around the dealership now, she wondered when that lesson had been forgotten. A few moments later, a receptionist finally approached her. Relief briefly crossed Monica's face. "Good afternoon," the woman said politely. "Have you been helped yet?" Before Monica could answer, Brad's voice carried across the showroom. "She is fine." The receptionist immediately stopped speaking. Monica noticed the reaction. So did the receptionist. Without another word, the employee apologized softly and walked away. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it revealed more than any report ever could. Employees were not merely following procedures. They were following signals. And every signal pointed back to one person. Sitting beneath the company logo, Monica closed her notebook and looked across the busy showroom. She had arrived expecting to investigate complaints. Instead, she was witnessing a culture that seemed built around deciding who deserved attention and who did not. And the deeper she looked, the more troubling the picture became. Monica Hayes remained in the customer lounge for nearly another half hour, quietly observing the dealership as though she were studying a living system. The longer she watched, the more visible the patterns became. It was not one rude employee. It was not one bad interaction. It was a culture. Every decision seemed influenced by assumptions about who looked important and who did not. Outside the massive showroom windows, afternoon sunlight reflected off rows of vehicles parked across the lot. Inside, polished floors and promotional banners created an image of success. Yet beneath the polished surface, something essential felt broken. Monica stood and slowly walked toward the dark blue SUV she had originally asked about. The vehicle sat beneath bright display lights near the center of the showroom. She examined the window sticker and reviewed the specifications. Several salespeople walked nearby. None stopped. None offered assistance. One employee glanced at her briefly before continuing toward a customer dressed in business attire. Monica smiled to herself. She no longer needed to test whether the problem existed. The problem was now testing itself. After several minutes, she approached a sales desk where a young associate was reviewing paperwork. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Could someone tell me more about this SUV?" The employee looked toward Brad Collins's glass office before answering. The reaction was subtle but unmistakable. "I'm actually tied up at the moment," he said. Monica glanced at the nearly empty desk. No customer sat nearby. No paperwork appeared urgent. Yet the employee looked nervous. Not busy. Nervous. Perhaps another associate? Monica asked. The young man hesitated. "You might want to come back another day." Monica thanked him and walked away. Behind her, the employee visibly relaxed. That reaction troubled her more than the answer itself. People who felt free to help customers rarely acted afraid. Across the showroom, Brad emerged from his office once again. He immediately noticed Monica still walking the floor. His expression suggested irritation. He crossed the showroom and stopped beside a luxury sedan display. "You are still here?" he asked. Monica nodded pleasantly. "I am still trying to learn about your inventory." Brad laughed lightly. "Most people do research online before spending this much time in a dealership." Monica studied him carefully. Every sentence carried the same underlying message. "You do not belong here. You are wasting our time. We have already decided who you are." Yet none of it was explicit enough to trigger an obvious complaint. That was what made it dangerous. The behavior existed in the space between words. Monica looked around the showroom. Customers continued arriving. Some received immediate attention. Others waited. A pattern emerged again and again. Certain people were welcomed enthusiastically. Others became invisible. The dealership logo stretched across the far wall above the customer waiting area. Monica's eyes returned to it. Years earlier, she had personally approved the company's customer service principles. Every visitor mattered. Every interaction mattered. Every employee represented the brand. Looking at the logo now felt almost painful. Brad followed her gaze and misunderstood completely. He assumed she admired the dealership's success. In reality, she was measuring the distance between the company's values and the reality standing in front of her. "If you are not purchasing today," Brad said, "we probably need to focus on customers who are ready to make decisions." The sentence settled heavily in the air. Several nearby employees heard it. So did a customer waiting beside a service counter. Nobody said anything. Monica simply nodded. Then she opened her notebook and wrote one final observation. As she closed it, a black SUV pulled into the reserved executive parking space outside the showroom entrance. Neither Brad nor the staff paid attention. But within that vehicle sat someone whose arrival would soon change the entire afternoon. The black SUV remained parked outside the dealership entrance while business continued as usual inside. Monica Hayes noticed it immediately, but showed no reaction. Instead, she remained seated beneath the company logo, quietly observing the showroom one final time. Brad Collins had already dismissed her as someone unimportant. That confidence seemed to grow with every passing minute. He moved across the showroom floor greeting selected customers, discussing sales numbers with managers, and projecting complete control over the operation. Yet Monica could see something he could not. The culture around him was beginning to reveal itself more clearly than any investigation report ever could. Near the service desk, the elderly customer who had been waiting earlier finally approached an employee for assistance. The conversation lasted less than a minute before the man returned to his chair, looking discouraged. A young mother entered the showroom holding the hand of a small child. She paused near a display vehicle and looked around for help. Several sales representatives saw her. None approached. Meanwhile, another customer wearing an expensive tailored suit received immediate attention from two employees at once. Monica wrote down another observation. The pattern remained consistent. It was not about availability. It was about assumptions. Across the room, Brad noticed Monica writing again. His expression tightened. He walked directly toward her. "You seem very interested in taking notes today," he said. Monica smiled politely. "I find details useful." Brad folded his arms. "Most customers spend more time looking at vehicles than writing in notebooks." Monica closed the notebook carefully. "Perhaps I am interested in more than vehicles." Brad laughed softly, but there was irritation beneath the sound. "Well, if you are not planning to purchase anything, I do have a business to run." Several nearby employees overheard the exchange. Monica noticed something interesting. Nobody looked surprised by Brad's tone. They looked accustomed to it. That realization troubled her more than the conversation itself. Culture became dangerous when people stopped noticing it. At that moment, the front doors opened. A tall man in a navy suit entered the showroom carrying a leather portfolio. The receptionist immediately stood. Two managers exchanged quick glances. Several employees straightened their posture. Monica recognized him instantly. David Mercer, Regional Operations Director, one of the most respected executives in the company. David's visit had not been announced to dealership management. Monica preferred it that way. Brad turned toward the entrance and smiled confidently. "David," he called. "Good to see you." The two men shook hands. Brad immediately began discussing monthly performance numbers and recent sales growth. David listened politely while scanning the showroom. His eyes moved across the vehicles, across the sales floor, across the customer lounge. Then suddenly he froze. Monica watched the exact moment recognition appeared on his face. It lasted less than a second, but it was unmistakable. David looked directly at her. Then he looked back at Brad. The difference in his expression was immediate. Brad continued speaking, completely unaware. "We are on pace for one of our strongest quarters," he said proudly. David barely seemed to hear him. His attention remained fixed on the woman seated beneath the company logo. Monica offered the slightest nod. Nothing more. David understood instantly. This was not a casual visit. This was an inspection, and the inspection had already been running for hours. Around them, the showroom remained busy. Customers continued browsing vehicles. Employees continued working. Nobody realized the atmosphere had changed. Nobody except David. As he slowly closed his portfolio and began walking toward the customer lounge, Monica placed her notebook on the table beside her. The next few minutes would determine the future of more than one career. And for the first time all afternoon, the confidence on Brad Collins's face began to fade. David Mercer crossed the showroom floor at a measured pace, his polished shoes barely making a sound against the gleaming surface. The atmosphere around him shifted immediately. Employees noticed. Managers noticed. Even customers seemed aware that someone important had entered the building. Yet David paid attention to none of them. His eyes remained fixed on Monica Hayes, seated quietly beneath the company logo. Brad Collins followed beside him, still attempting to maintain control of the situation. "I was just giving a quick overview of our quarterly numbers," Brad said confidently. "Performance has been strong across every category." David nodded politely but did not answer. Monica watched the exchange in silence. The contrast between the two men was impossible to miss. Brad focused on numbers. David appeared focused on something else entirely. As David approached the customer lounge, he stopped a few feet from Monica. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The showroom seemed unusually quiet. Then David smiled respectfully. "Good afternoon," he said. Monica returned the smile. "Good afternoon, David." Several nearby employees looked up immediately. The familiarity caught their attention. Brad's expression tightened. He glanced between them, trying to understand what he was seeing. David looked toward the empty chair beside Monica. "May I sit down?" Monica nodded. "Of course." The simple exchange created visible confusion across the showroom. Regional directors did not normally ask permission to sit beside random customers. Brad noticed it too. For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. David sat and glanced toward the notebook resting on the table. "Productive visit?" he asked carefully. Monica looked around the showroom. Customers browsed vehicles. Employees worked sales desks. Sunlight reflected across polished hoods and showroom glass. Everything still looked impressive from a distance. "Very productive," she replied. David understood immediately. Brad did not. He forced a smile. "I am glad to hear she had a positive experience." Monica slowly turned toward him. "I did not say positive." The words were calm, gentle, yet the impact was immediate. Several employees stopped what they were doing. Nobody spoke. David folded his hands and waited. Monica looked once more at the dealership logo mounted above the customer lounge. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she quietly asked a question. "David, how long has this location been receiving customer complaints?" Brad's smile disappeared completely. David answered honestly. "Several months." Monica nodded. "And how many internal reviews were conducted?" 3. Brad shifted his weight uncomfortably. The conversation was no longer moving in a direction he liked. Monica continued looking around the showroom. "Interesting," she said softly. "Because everything I observed today happened in plain sight." The words landed heavily. David remained silent. Brad attempted to recover. "Every dealership receives occasional complaints." Monica looked directly at him. Her expression remained calm. There was no anger, no raised voice, only disappointment. "Occasional complaints are not the issue." She glanced toward the elderly customer still waiting near the service area, then toward the young mother standing alone near a vehicle display, then toward employees who had ignored them both. "Patterns are the issue." For a moment, nobody moved. The showroom suddenly felt smaller. The bright lights seemed harsher. The silence seemed louder. Monica closed her notebook and rested her hand on the cover. She had arrived hoping the complaints were exaggerated, hoping the reports were incomplete, hoping the company values she built still lived inside this building. Instead, she had spent hours watching those values quietly disappear. Outside, the afternoon sun began sinking lower across the dealership lot. Inside, David understood that the moment of truth was approaching. Brad still did not fully understand, but that was about to change. Very soon, everyone inside the showroom would learn exactly who had been sitting beneath that logo all day. The showroom had never felt so quiet. Conversations faded. Phones stopped ringing. Even the usual rhythm of business seemed to slow as employees sensed something important unfolding near the customer lounge. Monica Hayes remained seated beneath the company logo while David Mercer sat beside her. Brad Collins stood a few feet away, struggling to understand why a regional operations director was treating an ordinary customer with such unusual respect. The uncertainty in his expression grew with every passing second. Monica looked across the showroom one final time. Her eyes moved from the reception desk to the sales floor, from the waiting area to the service department entrance. She wanted to remember everything exactly as it was, not because she enjoyed what she had seen, but because leadership required honesty. If a culture was broken, pretending otherwise solved nothing. David finally stood. The movement immediately drew attention. Employees nearby looked up. Managers stepped closer. Brad straightened his jacket and attempted to regain control of the situation. David, perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office, he suggested. David did not move. Instead, he looked directly at Brad. I think this conversation belongs right here. The response landed heavily. Several employees exchanged nervous glances. Monica calmly rose from her chair and picked up her notebook. The company logo stretched across the wall behind her, illuminated by the late afternoon sunlight pouring through the showroom windows. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Then David asked a simple question. Brad, do you know who this is? Brad looked at Monica and forced a polite smile. A customer who seems unhappy with her experience. David remained silent for a second. Then another. The tension became impossible to ignore. Finally, he answered. No. The single word echoed through the showroom. Employees stopped what they were doing. Managers turned toward the customer lounge. Even customers seemed aware that something significant was happening. David looked directly at Monica before speaking again. This is Monica Hayes. Several employees frowned, recognizing the name, but not yet understanding. Brad appeared confused. David continued. Founder of this company. Silence. Complete silence. The words seemed to remove every sound from the building. A sales associate near the reception desk nearly dropped a folder. Another employee froze beside a vehicle display. Brad stared at Monica as though trying to process what he had just heard. David finished the sentence. And chief executive officer of every dealership in this group. The silence somehow became even heavier. Brad's face lost color. His confidence disappeared instantly. Every interaction from the past several hours returned to him at once. The ignored questions, the dismissive comments, the assumptions, the customers left waiting, the culture he had allowed to grow. Monica remained calm. She had not changed. The only thing that had changed was what everyone else now knew. Around the showroom, employees looked at one another in disbelief. Some appeared embarrassed. Others appeared worried. A few simply looked stunned. Brad opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time all afternoon, he had no explanation. Monica looked at him quietly. There was no anger in her expression, no satisfaction, only disappointment. I came here as a customer, she said calmly. And what I experienced today should concern everyone in this building. Nobody interrupted. Nobody disagreed. Because everyone had seen it. Some had participated. Others had remained silent. But all of them had witnessed it. Monica closed her notebook and looked once more at the logo above the customer lounge. Years earlier, she had built the company around a simple promise. Respect first, everything else second. Standing beneath that promise now, she realized the next conversation would determine whether those words still meant anything at all. No one moved for several seconds after the truth was revealed. The dealership felt frozen in place beneath the bright showroom lights. Employees stood beside sales desks holding unfinished paperwork. Customers paused in the middle of conversations. Managers stared toward the customer lounge in disbelief. Monica Hayes remained calm throughout it all. She had not changed. She was still the same woman who had entered the building hours earlier and waited near the front doors without being greeted. The only difference was that everyone now understood who she was. Brad Collins looked as though the ground beneath him had disappeared. His eyes moved from Monica to David Mercer and back again. Every confident assumption he had made throughout the afternoon now seemed impossible to defend. Monica, I can explain, he finally said. Monica shook her head gently. I'm not interested in explanations right now. Her voice remained calm. That made the moment even more powerful. There was no anger to dismiss. No argument to challenge. Only facts. Monica looked across the showroom floor. What I witnessed today was not one mistake. She glanced toward the reception area where customers had been ignored, then toward the service lounge where people had waited without assistance. It was a pattern. The silence deepened. Employees listened carefully. Many appeared uncomfortable. Others appeared relieved. For the first time all day, the truth was being spoken openly. Monica continued. A customer should never need to prove their value before receiving respect. Several employees lowered their eyes. They knew exactly what she meant. David stepped forward and opened his portfolio. Inside were recent customer complaint summaries, internal reviews, and performance reports. Monica accepted the folder and briefly reviewed the documents. Then she closed it. The reports suddenly felt very different after seeing the dealership firsthand. Numbers could hide problems. Reality rarely did. Brad attempted to speak again. "We have strong sales results." Monica nodded. "Yes." The answer surprised him. "Sales are strong." Then she looked directly at him. "Culture is not." The words landed harder than any accusation. Around the showroom, employees exchanged nervous glances. Monica turned toward the management offices overlooking the floor. Glass walls reflected the late afternoon sunlight. For years, leadership decisions had come from those offices. Today, those decisions were being evaluated. This company was not built on sales numbers alone, Monica said. It was built on trust. She looked toward the dealership logo above the customer lounge. And trust disappears when people decide some customers matter more than others. Nobody argued. Nobody could. Monica handed the folder back to David. "Effective immediately, a formal leadership restructuring will begin at this location." A wave of shock moved through the showroom. Employees looked at one another. Managers stood motionless. Brad's expression fell. He already understood what was coming. Monica remained composed. "Every leadership position connected to today's failures will be reviewed." David nodded. "The process will begin immediately." Monica continued. "Several individuals will no longer serve in management roles after today." The words were direct but professional. This was not revenge. It was accountability. The distinction mattered. She looked around the showroom one final time. The goal is not punishment. The goal is rebuilding a culture where every customer receives respect the moment they walk through the door. For the first time all afternoon, a few employees seemed hopeful. They understood what Monica was trying to protect. Not a title, not a reputation, a standard. Outside, sunlight reflected across hundreds of vehicles parked throughout the lot. Inside, the future of the dealership was quietly changing. Monica picked up her notebook and held it in her hand. The observations written inside had already accomplished their purpose. The hidden visit was over. The real work was about to begin. The next morning, the dealership opened under a sky washed with soft golden light. From the outside, very little appeared different. Rows of vehicles remained lined up across the lot. Promotional banners still moved gently in the breeze. The glass showroom reflected the rising sun exactly as it had the day before. Yet inside, everything felt different. Employees arrived early. Conversations were quieter. People paid closer attention to one another. The leadership restructuring announced the previous afternoon had already begun. Several management positions were vacant. Temporary supervisors from neighboring locations had arrived before opening. Most importantly, the culture that had operated unchecked for months was finally being examined honestly. Monica Hayes returned shortly before opening time. This time she did not enter through a side door or blend into the crowd. She walked through the front entrance just as employees gathered for the morning meeting. Heads turned immediately. Yet the reaction was different from the shock of the previous day. The fear had faded. Respect had taken its place. David Mercer stood near the customer lounge reviewing schedules with the temporary management team. He greeted Monica with a smile. "Good morning." Monica nodded. "Good morning." Together they looked across the showroom floor. Employees arranged brochures. Reception staff prepared welcome packets. Service advisors organized appointments. The atmosphere felt focused. Not because people feared consequences, but because they finally understood expectations. Monica walked slowly toward the large company logo mounted above the customer lounge. Sunlight reflected across its polished surface. She remembered the first version she had sketched years earlier while building the company from almost nothing. Back then, success had seemed simple. Treat people with respect. Keep your promises. Build trust. Everything else would follow. Somewhere along the way, that lesson had been forgotten inside this dealership. Today it felt visible again. A few minutes later, the front doors officially opened. Employees instinctively looked toward the entrance. The first customer of the day stepped inside. An older man carrying a folder of vehicle information. Before he could take a second step, a receptionist smiled and greeted him warmly. A sales associate immediately introduced himself and offered assistance. The interaction lasted only seconds, but Monica noticed it. So did everyone else. It was simple. It was ordinary. It was exactly how it should have been all along. Throughout the morning, similar moments unfolded across the showroom. Customers were welcomed. Questions were answered. Employees worked together instead of competing for appearances. The atmosphere felt lighter, more genuine. Around midday, Monica prepared to leave. She stopped near the customer lounge and looked across the dealership one final time. Conversations flowed naturally. Employees smiled. Customers appeared comfortable. There was still work to do. Culture never changed overnight, but direction mattered. And for the first time in months, the dealership seemed headed in the right direction. David joined her near the entrance. Neither spoke for several moments. There was no need. Some lessons became stronger in silence. Monica glanced once more at the company logo above the showroom floor. Then she looked toward the customers arriving through the front doors. None of them knew the story of the previous day. None of them knew how close the dealership had come to losing its way. What mattered was what happened next. Monica smiled softly and stepped outside into the warm afternoon sunlight. Behind her, the showroom remained bright and welcoming. Ahead of her, the future stretched across the parking lot beneath a clear blue sky. She walked toward her vehicle without looking back. The logo remained shining above the entrance. The customers kept arriving. The employees kept greeting them. And in the quiet rhythm of an ordinary business day, the values that built the company finally felt alive again.